Has Nate done enough to be redeemed? Where have we seen Roy's sister before? Did you recognise the commentators' voices? We'll be talking about these questions and more in this video. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. In this video we'll be looking at episode 10 of season 3 of Ted Lasso, called International Break. Let's jump straight in. The episode starts with the news that Nate has left West Ham in mysterious circumstances. There are a few details about the reason for his departure given by the discussion on Soccer Saturday, but it's likely that Nate's refusal to join in with Rupert's guys' night in the last episode was the beginning of the end of his time at West Ham. Then we switch over to the Richmond changing room, where Bid calls out the names of the players that have received international call-ups. Jamie receives his first England call-up. Van Damme is called up for Canada, who will be facing Danny when he plays for Mexico. Bumbercatch has been called up for Switzerland and Colin for Wales. Notably, Sam hasn't been called up for the Nigeria squad, despite being a star player in Richmond's recent 10-game winning run. Jamie consoles Sam on being overlooked, despite the fact that he's just had his first ever call-up, showing that he's thinking about his teammates before himself, and that he's grown an awful lot since the first season. After the credits, we hear from Trent Crimm that Nate's exit from West Ham may have something to do with inappropriate workplace behaviour. While this may relate to something that Nate did, my money will be on Nate either walking out or getting sacked as a result of Rupert's illicit behaviour. We don't hear any more on the subject though, because Higgins enters the room to tell everyone that Edwin Afuku is in London to try and convince other club owners to form a Super League. Then we cut to Nate and Jade and we find out that he wasn't fired, he quit his job, and he's now having doubts about whether he made the right choice. Jade reassures him that he made the right decision and she leaves to visit her family in Poland. Nate watches her leave, having to navigate her way through a pack of photographers who are looking to get a picture of him. Things aren't going much better for Keely. She goes to the offices of KJPR to find out that everything has been cleared out. Jack's venture capital fund have pulled her funding and the office is now closing down. Danny, Rojas and Van Damme are on the same plane to their international match. Van Damme is friendly towards his teammate, but Danny's already seen Van Damme as his enemy ahead of their match against each other. To illustrate his point, Danny crushes the Doritos Van Damme offers him. Then there's a scene between Rebecca and Sam, where she also consoles him about not getting called up for the Nigerian national team. There's an awkwardness between the two former lovers, showing us that there's potentially still unfinished business between them, though there's not much time left in the series to resolve it if that's true. When Rebecca gets to her office, Rupert is waiting for her. Renee, the security guard that we last saw in Beard After Hours, let him in. He's come to invite Rebecca to a meeting of football club owners to discuss the modestly titled Akufu League. We then get to meet Roy's sister, as she's hosting Roy's Uncle's Day party, and Phoebe invited Jamie Tartt along too. Jamie's bought Roy a gift of an England shirt from the 2014 World Cup, but he switched the E in Kent for a U. It seems like a silly gift, but Roy is genuinely touched by it. Phoebe's present doesn't go down quite so well, as it's a tie-dyed t-shirt, meaning Roy will have to break with his colour scheme of dark heather charcoal. Roy just about manages to contain his disgust about the t-shirt, but when his sister and niece leave the room and Jamie comments that his sister is attractive, it's too much for Roy and he threatens to cut his eyes out. Edwin Afuku has booked up every table in Sam's restaurant under false names in order to have the place to himself. He then tells Sam that he's going to open up another Nigerian restaurant up the road to try and drive him out of business. He also tells Sam that he's made a $20 million donation to the Nigerian FA in exchange for them not calling him up to their national team. Keely is in the Crown and Anchor, drowning her sorrows, when she gets a text from Jack telling her there's nothing she could do about pulling the funding from KJPR. This is only partly true though. She could have at least called Keely to tell her that she's pulling the funding from the business, rather than leaving her to find her office stripped bare and letting Barbara break the news to her. Keely takes some business advice from May, which turns out to be pretty good. She tells her that once you get to the top of the mountain, what's left for you but lightning? Keely asks if the lightning is good or bad, and May says it depends if you're ready for it or not. There's definitely been a lack of lightning coming from Keely this season, so maybe this little talk will spark something, if you'll pardon the pun. The players are gathered in the press room to watch their teammates face off against each other in the Mexico v Canada match, and we see Danny blast the ball straight into Van Damme's face, leaving him with blood pouring out of his nose. Despite his mild-mannered nature around the changing room during club football, as a Mexico international, Danny is an absolute beast. As Rebecca is preparing for a meeting with the other football club owners about the Super League, we see her using the technique she talked about with Nate last season to build confidence. It involves looking at herself in a mirror and drawing herself up as tall as possible while spreading her arms out like a bird. While she's doing this, we see her looking at a reflection of herself as a child in the mirror. This shows us that she's feeling small and overwhelmed, but after she's carried out her ritual she feels better and sets off for a meeting. Then Roy Kent is dropping off his niece Phoebe at school, and he bumps into Phoebe's teacher from last season, and they talk about how she was flirting with him last time they met. She says that she hoped he didn't cause too much of a mess, which sets Roy off thinking about his relationship with Keely, and leads to him making a realisation which makes him walk off in the middle of their conversation. Before the Super League meeting, Rupert introduced his new assistant to Rebecca, Miss Bread. Apparently he had to get rid of Miss Cakes because she became dramatic. This suggests she was involved in the events that led to Nate's departure from West Ham. It's worth noting that Rupert's assistants' names have changed from Miss Cakes to Miss Bread. I don't think that's a coincidence. Cakes are a treat and bread is more of an everyday staple. I think that's possibly what's changing Rupert's recruitment strategy for his assistants too. Or, and this is pure speculation, it's possible that Bex might have had a hand in recruiting his latest assistant. Anyway, Rebecca and Rupert head into the meeting and say hello to the other club owners. They're all grey-haired old white men, and one of them makes a creepy comment about Rebecca's appearance. Then Edwin comes in and they sit down for something to eat before they begin to negotiate. Nate is taking a trip down memory lane at his parents' house. He looks back at his family photo album before taking a look through some old stuff in the attic, including a violin case. Meanwhile, Edwin Afuku makes his pitch to the other club owners about his vision for the Super League. They all seem interested, particularly the bit about them making lots more money. As the financial projections are being passed around, Rebecca receives a text from Keeley reminding her that all the men around the table were once little boys. This reminder bolsters Rebecca as she speaks up, confronting the men around the table, asking them how much more money do they really need. Then she gives a passionate speech about the importance of football in people's lives, and how football club owners aren't really the owners at all. They're merely the custodians, and the fans are the ones that really own the clubs. Because without them, football wouldn't mean anything. While Rebecca is making her speech, Nate is playing his violin in the background, and we see clips of Jamie Tartt making his England debut. He's wearing the number 24, Sam's number, as a tribute to his teammate. We also see Roy writing a letter to Keeley. Clearly, Rebecca's speech changes the owners' minds, as Edwin leaves the room and everyone else inside has been covered in food. It all happens off camera, but it seems he's had another unseemly meltdown, like he did last season when he was told he couldn't sign Sam, and this time he's thrown food all over the club owners. Rebecca and Rupert find it all very funny. Nate stops playing his violin when he sees his father stood in the doorway, listening to him. He apologises, but his father says he was enjoying listening. This is a surprise to Nate, as his father had previously said he hated the sound of him playing, because he didn't practice enough. This sparks an open discussion between the pair, where his father apologises for being too hard on him as a child. Nate's father pushed him because he knew he was a genius, and he thought that's what he had to do. But he pushed too hard, and he wasn't kind enough to his son. Even though few words are spoken in the scene, it's clearly significant for both of them, and they're both on the verge of tears by the end of it. Then, as Rupert is sharing a fond memory with Rebecca, he misreads the signs between them and tries to kiss her. She pushes him away and makes it clear they don't have that kind of relationship anymore. Roy goes to Keeley's house to hand deliver his letter, but she catches him pushing it under the door and makes him read it to her. She says it's because she can't read his handwriting, which is admittedly pretty bad, but I suspect it's because she wants to hear him say it out loud. Roy explains that the breakdown of their relationship was all his fault, because he was caught up in his own issues and pulled away. He apologises if anything he's done has made her doubt herself, and tells her that he loves her. Then, strangely, he signs a letter Roy Kent, as though there are dozens of Roys in her life that might have written such a letter, and he needs to clarify which one he was. I like how Keeley responds to Roy reading her the letter. In a rom-com, she'd throw herself into his arms, but instead she thanks him, nods, and then Roy walks off. Because people need time to process big stuff like this, and it makes sense she wouldn't immediately know how to respond to such a huge declaration all at once. Then we see Nate looking much happier at his parents' house, playing cards with his mum and dad. Things seem much more easy and natural between him and his father. The talk they had seems to have thawed something between them, and put their relationship on a new footing. Rebecca goes to visit Keeley, and when she finds out the funding has been pulled from her agency, she immediately offers to pay it instead. Then Rebecca tells Keeley about how Rupert made a pass at her. They discuss how bad an idea it would have been for her to go back with her ex, as, in the background, we see evidence that Keeley has got back with hers, as Roy walks down in Keeley's dressing gown. Over at AFC Richmond, there's been an unexpected visitor at the changing rooms. Willa Kitman arrives and finds that all the kits and towels have been laid out for him. Then he finds a note with a sprig of lavender attached to it from Nate, apologising. Then we see Nate sneaking back out of the ground through Renee's secret entrance, so that's the second major security breach he's allowed this episode. Next we see Barbara return to KJPR offices to return the snow globe Keeley bought her, because she wants to carry on working for her. She no longer wants to work for Jack, and she's going to be Keeley's CFO if she'll have her. Keeley's delighted and wraps her up in a big hug, which is obviously more physical contact than Barbara is comfortable with, but she appreciates the sentiment. At AFC Richmond, players have returned from international duty, and Danny Rojas is all smiles again after being so mean to Van Damme. Roy is now wearing tie-dye t-shirts through choice, as it seems like he wants to let a bit of colour into his life, and Rebecca is wearing more relaxed clothes and letting her hair down at work. After seeing the other football club owners as just little boys, she seems a lot more relaxed now. I thought this was a great episode. It now feels like the season is getting close to the end, as many of the plot lines are coming to a conclusion and the pace of the story is picking up. As a result of all this, the episode was really enjoyable to watch. It was another episode of Ted Lasso with very little Ted in it, but that didn't reduce my enjoyment. I'm guessing it was because it was pushing forward the stories with the other characters, so we can spend more time with Ted in the last two episodes. Before the episode, I was concerned this one would be a bit weaker because it's set in an international break, so there was no Richmond game to build the episode around. I also found Edwin Afuku's character a bit over the top at times last season, But in this episode, his most extreme behaviour happened off camera, which I think was a good choice. So my concerns weren't founded, and I think this episode was one of the best ones in the season so far. I liked how this episode played around with the idea of the clubs forming a breakaway Super League, which is obviously inspired by the failed attempt to do the same thing in the real world, by the 6 richest clubs in the Premier League and 6 other European clubs. Edwin Afuku did a good job of articulating the greed-driven reasons for wanting to consolidate all the money in football between a few elite clubs at the top of the game, and then to charge fans more for the privilege of watching those games. Rebecca's impassioned response pointed out why such a league is so disgusting to fans and any true lovers of football. I like that Ted Lasso is willing to take on these sorts of current issues. I get the feeling that the show's creators want to use their platform to speak on issues that they care about. This hasn't gone down well at times this season, when they've touched on social issues, and I've seen some people get cross and accuse the show of going woke, whatever that means. But I think almost everyone hates the idea of a Super League, apart from billionaire club owners, so this subject was fairly safe territory. It's finally happened, and Keely and Roy are back together, or at least Roy has made the first steps towards repairing their relationship, and it seems to have been well received by Keely. We don't know much more than that yet, but surely it'll be interesting to see what happens next for them. Hopefully we'll see Roy believe that he's worthy of Keely, and then he can help build her up rather than be a drain on her time. And while it seemed like a disaster when Jack pulled the funding from the PR company and left her with nothing, she's now got the same funding from someone who really believes in her, and can now build the company she really wants, rather than having to use the grey office drones provided by the venture capital company. Though having Barbara will mean that she's got someone by her side who can do the boring business side of things. Nate leaving West Ham was interesting. It all took place between the end of the last episode and the start of this one, so we don't know the exact details beyond the fact that Nate quit, and it's likely that Miss Cakes was involved as she's gone too, and it would go some way to explain Trent Grimm's talk of inappropriate workplace behaviour. I'm hoping we'll find out a bit more about Nate's exit in the next episode, either with a flashback or him telling the story of what happened. It would be nice to know specifically what went on. It'd be great to get to see him stand up to Rupert. If nothing else, it'll help to show us that he's changed and he's now a more likeable person. I'm not sure I've seen enough with Nate to feel like he's redeemed as a character at this point. He was pretty awful in Season 2, and while I obviously feel sorry for himself in this episode, is he actually a better person now? He seems to have stopped being nasty to people. It was nice to see him make an apology to Will, but is that enough? Will seems satisfied, but if I was in his position, I'm not sure I'd be quite as forgiving after the way that he was treated. The international call-ups were only minor storylines in this episode, despite the episode being called International Break, but it was still interesting to see the show cover the highs and lows of international duty. Jamie getting his first call-up was a suitable reward for the hard work he's put in. Sam being cruelly denied his call-up because of Edwin Akufu's pettiness was completely unreasonable, but hopefully there'll still be time to correct that before the end of the season. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets a call-up for the Nigeria squad before the final episode ends. If Roy's sister seemed familiar, that might be because she was the A&E doctor who treated Dr. Sharon when she had a bike accident in Season 2. Or it might be because she had remarkably similar eyebrows to Roy Kent. The sprig of lavender on the apology note Nate writes to Will is a callback to the time Will switched to lavender-scented washing detergent last season, and Nate blew up at him about it. In the Midnight Train to Royston episode last season, Higgins mentioned that he wrote a play about a billionaire who has a day out with a footballer and finds some glass in his meal, so he has his meal for free. So Edwin Kufu's colleague saying that he found glass in the meal and asking for it to be free is a callback to the plot for Higgins' play. After the episode aired, Nick Mohammed, who plays Nate, confirmed that it really is him playing the violin, and his real-life wife accompanies him on the piano for the soundtrack for that section of the show. When Jade says to Nate that he can come watch her family screwing light bulbs, she's referring to an apparently common joke along the lines of how many Polish people does it take to screw in a light bulb? 3, 1 to hold the light bulb and 2 to turn the ladder, which is a joke at the expense of the people of the country. So she's using the joke that plays in the national stereotype to make Nate uncomfortable, which seems to be a favourite type of joke with Nate, because it's so easy to make him flustered and awkward. The change in Danny Rojas, the Mexico player, compared to Danny Rojas, the Richmond player, was obviously played for laughs, but teammates becoming enemies during international games does happen in real life. The most recent real-life situation I can think like this was the 2022 World Cup, when Harry Kane took a penalty against Hugo Lloris in the England-France semi-final match. The two are teammates at Tottenham, so they'll practice literally hundreds of penalties against each other on the training ground, but in that game there's a place in the World Cup final at stake. As it happened, Hugo Lloris saved Harry Kane's penalty, which is a pivotal moment in the game, which ended 2-1 in France's favour. So not having one for a while, we were treated to 2 Coach Beard books in this episode. The first one was Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest by Suzanne Simard, which is a book all about how trees are seemingly not just trees that exist on their own, but are an interconnected network that communicates with each other. As if I didn't have enough to worry about, now I've got to think about trees that are colluding with each other. I didn't really think that this book sounded all that interesting, but I feel like I probably should read it now, just to set my mind at ease that the trees aren't chattering away, plotting the downfall of humanity. We're doing a good enough job of creating our own downfall, thank you very much, trees. The other book that Beard is reading is a bit less abstract. It's called The Club by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg. His subtitle explains what it's about: how the English Premier League became the wildest, richest, most disruptive force in sports. It sounds like an interesting look at how the Premier League has become such a dominant force in world sport, and because of that it's so attractive to some pretty unsavoury characters. Higgins mentions that Willy Wonka murdered the other children that visited the chocolate factory in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Because I've clearly got nothing better to do with my time, I looked it up, and his theory may be true of the films, as the children are never seen again after their time when the tour comes to an end. However, in the Roald Dahl book that inspired the movies, Charlie sees the children leaving the factory at the end of the story, so they aren't killed in the novel that inspired the films. The commentators in the Canada-Mexico match are the improv comedians Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles, who I loved watching in the 90s on Whose Line Is It Anyway? The bit where Nikolai takes a bit too long to leave the room because he's trying to push a door that he should be pulling is the exact kind of uncomfortable joke you would find on the show I Think You Should Leave Now with Tim Robinson, which Sam Richardson, the actor who plays Edwin Afuku, is a frequent guest star. There are now just 2 episodes left in the season, so things are starting to come to a head. I'm now going to speculate about what I think is going to happen next, so you might want to stop watching if you don't want to hear any clues about what might lie ahead. Okay, so the next episode is called Mom City. An Apple description says, an unanticipated guest has Ted on edge. When Richmond travel to Manchester for a big match, Roy and Keeley become concerned about Jamie. My guess is that the unanticipated guest will be Ted's mum, as it was announced before the season started that an actress had been cast for that role, but we've still not seen her. As for why Ted's mum's coming to England, I'd guess Ted himself could explain that, as he said in an earlier episode that meeting people's mums is like reading an instruction manual on why they're nuts, so it'll most likely give us an insight into some of Ted's peculiarities. I have a feeling we're going to get to find out a bit more about Jamie's mum too, which should lead us to a scene we saw in the trailer for this season, which seemed to show Roy and Keeley sat in the bed in Jamie's childhood bedroom. The football side of things should be interesting too. Ted describes Man City as Richmond's blue whale, the team that they're desperate to beat, and this is their best chance to beat them yet, as they've now got a unique brand of football which they've been using to get results, and they've been winning rave reviews with it. But is it good enough to beat the best team in the league? We should find out in the next episode. This has been my recap and review of episode 10 of season 3 of Ted Lasso. Please subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. It helps the channel to grow and means you're less likely to miss out on the next video when it comes out. I'll be posting my video for episode 11 shortly after it airs. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.